Hello and welcome once again, pod fans, to the No Coast Defenders. As always, I'm here with Dan and Tim. So
Hello.
there was a lot that happened in this episode. So we're on the Void, although we don't get the Sentry, we just get the Void. But uh, and fun episode. Tim, did you need a recap of it?
No, I was kidding.
Okay.
How can I forget what happened in this episode?
All right. Yeah, there was a lot, and the Void stuff. I got excited when they said the Void because I did think Sentry, but that clearly wasn't where they were going.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys would call that being called the Void an Easter egg or not. I don't think so because it's just a good word for what that existence is. But a lot
What
of
was the
these,
I'm sorry. What was the cloud's name?
the Cloud is Aloth the Usurper. I don't think they refer to they don't call him the Usurper, but that's the
Yeah.
comic book character name. But
Yeah.
a lot of Easter eggs in this, and thank you to the internet. Did compile a list of them. I'm going to go through really quickly. First one, obviously, is the episode name is Journey into the Mystery, so the comic book.
Fantastic.
So that was just the great. The Stark / Avengers Tower everyone kept pointing out, of course, is but isn't Stark Tower because it's Kang Tower after an alternate Kang buys it. As Tim just mentioned, the Cloud Monster is Aloth the Usurper, who has, of course, ties in the comic books to both Renslayer and Kang. Yellow Jacket's helmet is there.
Yes.
Thanos copter, which is the most hilarious of the things.
Yeah.
Of course, we get Throg and Mjolnir. Like,
I had that Leo moment, from the meme where he's like pointing at the TV with his
Yeah.
drink. That was me when Throg was on there. I'm like, holy shit.
And not to mention, it had on the jar, it had the issue number that Throg
Yeah.
appears in.
yeah. And then they're drinking Rox wine, so we get another reference to Roxy Corp and what it becomes, which I think is just one of the best like comparisons to our Walmarts and our Amazons that are just slowly becoming all encompassing. We get a fallen shield helicarrier, which shocking, we haven't seen one of those before in the MCU. We get Ronin's ship also crashed. We get the head of the Living Tribunal.
Yeah.
Which it's hard to tell exactly what it is, but I've seen some blown up images of it, and it feels like it'd be hard to deny that's the Living Tribunal. The car Mobius is driving, of course, the license plate is GRN W1D, which is Grenwald, who Mobius is reportedly based on, who was a Marvel Comics writer for a while.
And sneaky, a couple episodes ago, I talked to you guys about some leaked stills, and that was Mobius driving the car, except the CGI of Alioth was taken out.
Yeah,
Driving the Pizza Planet truck.
Yeah.
Some really fun ones that they just really had a good time with is the USS Eldridge, which reportedly it did disappear, but like the circumstances were always have always been a mystery, so we now know that. Oswald and the Martins is the listed billing for the theater for what's playing. Oswald the Rabbit predates Mickey Mouse.
Yep.
Before Universal claimed him, so that's a fun alternate timeline that had to get corrected. Of course, Kid Loki, when the other Lokis, including Gator Loki, are drinking wine, he's drinking Ecto Cooler, so we get another we get another discontinued drink. And also in that scene, you get Polybus arcade game, which is allegedly an arcade game that hypnotized players for a sinister unknown purpose. And then all the cabinets strangely vanished, leaving no traces. The rumor behind that. So fun that there it is in the Loki bowling alley. Also, in that same shot, we get Throg. There's a bunch of TVA like lunch trays and drinks. So the implication there, in such a minor but brilliant detail, is since they don't know what they're doing when they're pruning, they think they're just destroying things. They're just pruning their trash at the TVA. And then a smaller one, the God of Outcast line is a direct quote from Loki in 2019, when Loki refers to himself as God of Outcasts. And then, of course, forgive me, I'm going to butcher how you announce it, but Loki's sword at the end, Leviathan, which is the sword he's used in Norse mythology. So a lot of fun Easter eggs. And then some things that you kind of have to stretch is the car looks similar to Pizza Rocket's pizza thing. And there's a Hawaiian girl on the dashboard, and we've seen Hawaiian girls, but that's
You
an
mean
age
Pizza
transition.
Planet?
Yeah, Pizza Planet. So there's some that I don't know, but some people on the internet are driving hard that these are indeed Easter eggs, but they just seem like you're looking for them. Because one I saw that said that Buzz and Woody were now going to be definitely confirmed for Spider-Man because we've got Pizza Planet here in Logan.
I mean, they could just be having fun too. It's
Yeah,
I think that the big one, the big takeaway from all of that is the Yellow Jacket helmet, simply because of the quantum realm and the implications that could be there. And he's confirmed to be in the next Ant-Man, so I think that's really
Yes.
well,
I'm super excited about that.
one I didn't list because I don't think it's an Easter egg because I think it's part of the series is that image at the end is that Chronopolis we're seeing. Obviously, you can't really see too well, but Chronopolis would fit, as would any number. It could be Victor Von Doom's Castle Doom. There's so many castles in the greater MCU, and then they could be making an original castle. So I didn't list it as an Easter egg because it's not an Easter egg. It's clearly what's going to happen next. Whereas like they changed Eliath's character, whereas before he's a rival to Kang, now he looks like he's a guard dog to whoever we're getting beyond. So that feels more like an Easter egg to a character than an actual anything, because guard dog Cloud is not the villain he is in the comic book. So
well, I mean, it just makes sense. You know, it does with the trajectory, and with that, I mean, it's a teaser for Kang, but they don't even have to give us Kang necessarily. So,
I think they went too heavy-handed on Kang. So if you're still in the I think we're getting Kang part, like this either reinforced that because there's too much Kang for it not to be, or it reinforced that it's definitely not because they were too heavy-handed with it. But the phrase throughout the series has been expect the expected. So
yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just say I've been leaning heavily on the train of the One Who Remains, because throughout these other series, sans Agatha Harkness, we've been getting a lot of like one and done villains, because you got technically Wanda's Grief, you got the Flag Smashers. So I think the One Who Remains is appropriate because he's threatening enough because he's all encompassing. He created the TVA. He can be one and done in this series. Don't necessarily ever need an overarching villain to be introduced.
You know, it's with this series, it's interesting because we have one episode left and we're still debating like who is the villain. So I feel like we've already seen the villain in a lot of ways, whoever it is, whoever the big bad is. There's obviously more to come with the season 2 and whatever else is being set up, you know, in Quantumania. And I just think that whoever the villain is, we've already seen him, even if it's just a showdown with Renslayer. You know, I think that they already exist to us.
Well, the alternate option is it's a variant Loki or variant Lokis.
Could be King Loki, who's like the most despicable Loki.
I really hope not.
And in that case, like if it's a variant Loki, we both have and haven't seen it. Just kind of like how Sharon Carter was the power broker, and
it's Tour de France Loki.
It very could be. Sheryl Crow would probably argue that it's based on a villain. So,
part of me really, you know, I went King Loki in my head just because you have all these Lokis and he's the worst of all, and we haven't seen him, but we have a kingdom, and we know what that kingdom is, but it doesn't mean somebody else isn't inhabiting it at the moment, you know. And that makes sense, and that'd be a quick 40-minute runoff, boom, done. Loki is one with himself among the variants, you know. It makes sense, I guess I'm saying. I don't know that that's going to happen. I don't really think it's going to happen, but it would make sense to me if they're to introduce anybody at this stage.
Yeah, what's really interesting is, I mean, first off, we kind of talked in our chat where Dan mentioned Eliath kind of reminding him of Lost. And this is very much the Lost episode, as 100 different people covering Loki have mentioned. But one of my favorite guys who's covered it, and he only covered it this week, is David Shoemaker, who is a graphic designer by trade, but also big wrestling fan who wrote a wrestling book. He went on to the Ringerverse to talk with Mallory Rubens about this. And I enjoyed his perspective because it was completely different, because he comes at it from the angle of a wrestling fan, which normally can be written off because wrestling storylines are kind of haphazard at best. But Michael Waldron is a giant professional wrestling fan and a huge fan of David Shoemaker as a person who covers pro wrestling. So that put me in the mind of, oh, are we getting a heel turn? And Shoemaker's big point was at the end when Sylvie asked Loki if she can trust him. And he says, he goes into a spiel about betraying everyone who's ever cared for him. And he doesn't say he's not going to. He says, I will not disappoint you. And the series has always been about what makes a Loki. So if he betrays her, that's what Lokis do. It was perfectly, that was shown point blank when you had double and triple crosses in the bowling alley by the Lokis. But at the same time, classic Loki was there to show that Lokis can be more. And then when they escape the bowling alley and he's venting, and Kid Loki says, anytime one of us makes a step to become better, the TVA steps in. So we got both set up that Loki and Sylvie are going to be triumphant heroes together. And also one of them is going to double cross the other in this next episode. So it's, I've been saying, like, I love the storytelling, and the fact that they laid both those out to me is like perfect, because neither ending would be dissatisfying to me because they're both there and they're both correct in how they happen.
You mentioned classic Loki. Can we just say how Richard E. Grant deserves all the praise, all the awards?
Yes.
Like, holy shit. I mean, his screen time was maybe 10 minutes and just wow.
They kind of milked the glorious purpose line a bit too much in this series, but I don't mind it coming from Richard Grant's mouth.
That was just
no
wild.
And you'd said, can we give him the award for supporting actor in a limited series? And I think he earns it, because all the little stuff they've been laying out, Richard Grant like illustrates and pulls together. I mean, Mobius in the first episode tells Loki that a Loki's part isn't to be the main, it's to help the person get to where they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that's exactly what a Loki did here. Richard Grant got 2 other Loki variants where they're supposed to be. Kid Loki, to an extent, got 2 other variants where they're supposed to be. Hell, Gator Loki got 2 other. So in that sense,
my man Croaky.
And then in the sense, like, though, like Loki and Sylvie being there helped those 3 achieve something more. So it's interesting that he was there, like, in the whole like story about not using a dagger because the magic's more powerful than you know, which then we see him when he rebuilds as a distraction. And you hear Loki say, I think we're more powerful than we know. And then they do the holding hands thing, because are you really combining your powers in Marvel if you don't hold hands to defeat the enemy?
Yeah.
That's what the school dances tried to get us to avoid for all of our lives. They didn't want our powers to be realized. You know, I know I've had my unhappiness with the series, and I don't know that this episode necessarily rescued it, but after that moment, after this acting that he portrayed, I kind of had this moment where I sat back. I'm like, I honestly don't give a shit what happens. Like, that just made it for me right there. Like, the first episode of this series is one of my favorite episodes, or pretty much any piece of the MCU thus far. And this moment of his acting was just pure perfection. Comic book show, MCU, whatever. I mean, just perfection. So for me, I don't care. Like, I may walk away not liking the series, but in this moment, like, that was probably my favorite bit of acting in the MCU thus far.
I really wish we got more President Loki after being so prevalent in the teasers.
Yeah. And who knows? Maybe we still will.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a great scene of him getting his hand bitten off. So
yeah.
Yeah. How about the character with no lines became the biggest character of all?
Well, it's interesting because I think I got the biggest moment of enjoyment is with Loki is going on a speech before they go into the underground bowling alley, and they're all laughing, and Gator Loki's laughing as well. And I was like, holy shit, like that's so simple, but so brilliant. And then they're just pouring wine down his mouth and he prays. And
That's the part where I was cracking up is the freaking wine.
but then when they laugh again, Gator Loki doesn't laugh the second time. And I thought that was like a weird moment not to have him laugh both times.
Right.
The memes that have come from this character are some of the best memes I've ever seen. I sent one to Dan that was the scene where Pietro shows up at the door of Wanda's house, but instead when she opens it, it's Gator Loki with Quicksilver's hair.
Oh,
and then
that's brilliant.
And then it cuts to Darcy. Did they cast Pietro or recast Pietro? Oh my god. I just can't.
I actually wish I was not drinking a bottle of water when you sent me that, because that definitely involved water out of my nose. But this episode, it didn't feel like a turning point, though it was. It just, for some reason, part of it just stood still to me. And I think that it's because of how much I appreciated. Last week I was talking about like how these sets should be more illuminating, and Loki scenes like in the comics are just so breathtaking with every image. And this whole episode was all about imagery. It was all about pretty much everything I shit on last episode that I need from this show to be able to respect it. In this episode, it's like they're listening to me and they caught up and they just like vomited everything I wanted in greatness. So I'm appreciative of the episode and the attention to detail that they had for the landscape of things, for the imagery, for even the spotlight on the acting and each character knowing their purpose. It sounds cliche because of that line, but knowing exactly what they need to be and getting the right screen time for that. I just, this felt like the most complete episode thus far in terms of everything we were offered.
Well, and of course, boastful Loki, true to the trickster nature, tricked me since I opted to marry him in last week's Marry Date Chill because he was worthy. And turns out, no, he just lies about his accomplishment. So he built himself a hammer. But I thought also, like, boastful Loki, he served as a good foil to the actual Lokis who want to better themselves.
I mean,
Yeah.
Not really. It happened so quick. I didn't even realize they betrayed him at first. I wish, like, even though that was just to move them along and get them separated and back on track with getting past Alioth. I don't know. They could have made more of a story out of it. Like, would have been nice to have like a little bit more time in there and set up the void a little bit more, but to each his own, I guess.
It's interesting for me because we have two very different stories here. We have the TVA, and then we have Loki, and then we have all this other stuff. And that's why I feel like 6 episodes wasn't long enough for this, because despite how great this episode was, I feel like we just still didn't go anywhere. Knowing that we have 1 episode left, it makes it really hard for me to have confidence that it's going to wrap up. And yes, I know there's a season 2, but you have to wrap up something. So it's like, which storyline are they going to wrap up? And hopefully they don't try to wrap up multiple ones at once, because I think that would be a disservice to them, I guess. There's just a lot being juggled at once. And I don't think that it was planned or executed the best. But I mean, who knows? When the finale wraps, I may think differently, and I could be wrong. But it's just kind of my gut feeling that there were multiple stories going on here. We didn't get enough fleshed out of each story to really do them justice.
And of course, this is where you and I have been disagreeing, is I think the Loki and the TVA story are fully intertwined. And I think that'll especially be true when we get next week revealed that Mobius is a Loki variant that just doesn't know he's a Loki variant, which was another Shoemaker observation, is when they're staring out at this demon cloud, it's all Loki variants and then Mobius. And then when Mobius is talking with classic Loki, Kid Loki, and Gator Loki, who isn't talking but is there, and he's like, I don't remember him. Are you sure he's a Loki? I love the responses. He's green.
Yeah.
Like that's how you know he's a Loki, is he's green.
I mean, the show hasn't shied away from deviating from the comics by any means, so it could be possible. this is the first time where comic canon doesn't mean shit. Well, not the first time we just saw Black Widow, but where comic canon doesn't mean shit um, to this crew. So I mean, it very well could be.
Yeah, and I'm of the opinion that Comic Canyon shouldn't mean shit. Like they're not remaking the comic books. This isn't the remake of Journey into Mysteries volume 17 through 34. This is an original story that's using characters based on comic books. And
Yeah.
just even if you look at real life, like just the based on, you have to remember that Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Silence of the Lambs, which are very, very two different stories, are based on the same person.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, but
Huh.
they're very, very different stories because based on you could just means you're taking a loose inspiration.
Oh, they're based on Ed Gein, weren't they?
Yeah,
Oh, wow. I would
Yeah.
never expect that from Sounds of the Lambs.
yeah, because they're
It
just
makes sense now.
Yeah, because all you need for based on is just it's based on because I took inspiration from this one character.
You know, I think the difficulty when it comes to the comics, though, is weaving those stories together because it is the source material. And without that, it's really just a character that's being reinvented. And there's nothing wrong with that. They plan these phases out, 10, 15 movies at a time, which are based on the comics. So to deviate too far would really throw a wrench into a lot of these plans, especially in terms of the world building they're doing around, like, say, a Wakanda, things like that, where now it's Ryan Coogler has free will for multiple series on Disney Plus the movie, and all of that does stem from the comics to introduce villains and stuff like that. So though I'm not all for like, oh, it's not canon, I don't like it, it does have its validity in a lot of realms, especially when we're dealing with Kang, who is from the original Avengers series, and from the, some of these classic storylines where in order to make that character relevant, you need some of this stuff tied in. So it is a fine dance. This show kind of just gave us new characters, which I actually, at the comic shop, we often have this Chet and I especially, where don't reinvent something, give us a new character. And so I like that they did that, with Loki, and even who Sylvie is. Sylvie's a totally new character based on who she is. So I like that part of it. So it's interesting to me, and that's why the Mobius thing could work if they just want to reinvent that. But I'd rather just have a new character or a new iteration of something.
Well,
So
you got me thinking about this last week when you were talking about how it doesn't, like, this Loki we've got in the series doesn't feel like the Loki in the comic books. And I was like, well, here's the thing about the Loki in the comic books. He's been around forever and he's had periods where he didn't feel like himself. And he's had periods where he's overly stagnant. And I think that's what we forget about these comic book characters is Peter Parker was in high school for fucking decades.
Mhm.
Then he grew up and got a real job. And then all of a sudden he was back in college. Like, just the nature of comic books is characters stay stagnant for way too long and then they make crazy jumps, but you don't have the time to keep a character stagnant and then make crazy jumps in retcon because we're casting real people in these roles, so they're going to age out of them if you keep them stagnant for too long. So you need growth and storytelling.
I think for me, the reason why I didn't feel like Loki for much was Loki's a very chaotic character regardless of his mood, and the imagery, after seeing this last episode, the imagery is really what got me. It wasn't Loki imagery. From every scene that's painted, and I started going back looking at the books, and I was looking at different scenes like in the panels and stuff like that. I'm like, that's Loki. So when they finally did this episode where there's so many details going on, so much just like pure chaos, even insane moments, that's what I needed. I think I've been missing more of the imagery than anything else. And so I'm glad that they pulled that together in this episode, because do whatever you want with the character, I don't care. But if this character is often having certain landmark scenes that they are in terms of visuals, I want that visual, unless it has Hickman's name on it in the 2000s. Then don't put it in.
Tim, I know you have thoughts about the idea of original characters.
Yeah. No. They have so many characters that they could be using. I personally don't feel there's a need for any original characters. There's so many characters that I personally would like to learn about, and instead we get, most of the time lazily written and just characters that they don't know what they want to do with, and they just have them in there just because. I'm not saying that's the case for all characters, but that's kind of how I felt with Sylvie. Is she's a hodgepodge of too many characters, and that was kind of off-putting to me.
She is a hodgepodge of a lot of characters, but I think she's become a character on her own. And
Eh,
I love the Sylvie character. I love what the Sylvie character has sparked inside, for lack of a better term, our Loki. Because that just fits in that with like a Loki's purpose is to help someone else achieve their purpose. And in this case, like it's cyclic. Like these Lokis are pushing each other to their glorious purpose. And that line has been overused in the series, definitely overused in this series, but even the way it was used, like it was disparaging coming out of classic Loki's mouth earlier in
well,
the episode. But when he yells it at the end, it's triumph. That's
yeah,
he's come full circle from meeting these Lokis. So
I guess at the end of the day, it does kind of tie into that original feeling of helplessness and feeling minuscule at what that he did at the end of the first episode, and glorious purpose. Everyone's there doing what they do for a reason, and just that Loki is not going to have anyone define that for him, which was subtle, but they did a good job of expressing that message.
did the yeah, Dan.
I just really loved when Mobius said, "You're my favorite" to Sylvie.
Yeah,
I was so good. It was so good.
But it was so Owen Wilson, but also just it was just so Owen Wilson. It was very tender, but I mean,
yeah.
I haven't been fond of the Sylvie character that much myself. I think the actress is a badass. I just don't like the writing for her. But that moment right there just kind of made everything for me.
I think from the moment Mobius and Sylvie meet up with the crew of Lokis, I think like the whole like the screen like crackles with energy. Even the Mobius, I mean, I already mentioned like the he's green line, but he's like, I don't know, he could be running the long con. Well, that would be a very Loki move. I dig it. Like just everything about that interaction between those four characters, because I'm still gonna pretend Gator Loki was engaged in the conversation there.
Oh, he definitely was.
That was just fun, and that kind of gives credence to the idea that he is a Loki variant of some sort, because from the beginning he's been way into what makes a Loki. So I'm like, okay, is he that into Lokis because he is a Loki? Is he going to go burn it down because he's starting to uncover like his true chaos that's been buried underneath him by being reset? I don't know. It could be completely wrong, and wrong or right, as long as B-15 gets a moment in the last episode. I only need, like, if we're going to go 45 minutes, give me 10 minutes in the TVA and let B-15 have 3 minutes of that to shine. Like, I feel like she sidelined this series, and I think that's what I'm most disappointed in.
But but she was really great in the scenes that she was in. Granted, these middle episodes felt like she felt like more like a by the books character. But once she caught on, once she got put in that cell by Ravonna, she that was awesome. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And then how can you not love that first intro scene with her knocking the shit out of Loki at like a 16th speed?
9 episodes. We had 9 episodes. I think I would absolutely love this show because there's so much. B-15 especially. I could do a whole episode on B-15. I could do a whole episode on certain characters. So it's, I don't know. It's just been a disservice not getting those moments, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, we all feel like we're getting season 2. It's heavily rumored. It's essentially all but confirmed. I would love to see B-15 in a spotlight in a season 2. But I think to set that up, she's got to have a moment to shine coming up in this last episode.
Yep.
Can we point out, though, that our Loki has no game whatsoever?
Now, how'd you feel about that will they, won't they scene? It bothered me, but at the same time, it was cute. Like, I went back and forth about it.
Yeah.
Cute, but unnecessary.
It was definitely cute, but I don't know how unnecessary, because it's clearly been illustrated that the Lokis don't love. They don't let people in. So of course neither of them have game, neither of them know how to make a move, because they've never made a move where there's feelings and there's emotions. They're tricksters gods. They literally follow the playbook of the game and they're peacocking around. So for it to be real for them, of course they're not going to know how to act. In that
Right.
moment, they're
But
teenagers encountering their first love.
but they need to do it in a non-romantic way, because the director came out and said that there's nothing romantic that's going to happen between the two of them. And granted, it's hard to say for certain whether that's true or not, because of how often they lie to protect plot points. But yeah, I just don't like the way they went about it.
I'd argue they've already had romantic moments between the two of them. So
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
You know what's
sorry, I'm the Dan today. It's weird.
You know what's interesting is the reference to Loki season 2. Do you know who's making the most comments about it? And it's really caught me by surprise, but also made me quite happy. It's Clark Gregg.
Yeah, he has been all about that.
And I'm
Name
like,
sounds familiar.
it's Coulson.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but it's for some reason he like is unprovoked just making comments about season 2 and what's to come, and he's having Tom Hiddleston. I'm like, are we getting Loki? Agents Loki there.
Holy shit! If he shows up for Retribution in
Right?
the last episode, oh my god!
I've been seeing, and I know it's a lot of speculation, but it's like he's doing the speculating. I've seen so much talk from him. Like, it's like, hey, it's like that meme, like nobody. Clark Gregg, hey, can I tell you about Loki today? Like it's like it's out of nowhere too. And I'm just, I follow all the nerd shit and I'm on all the different stuff. And so to see that keep coming up, and he's not listed as a part of the cast anywhere. Season 2 is not confirmed yet. He talked about Hiddleston talking about shooting 12 episodes of Loki, and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I'm slightly intrigued as to whether or not he is going to be involved in a future Loki project or even the finale.
Well, and it would make sense if there's going to be a second one. I don't think you're getting Michael Waldron back for a second season. I think once he goes on to Strange, like it just feels like they're starting to figure out that let creative teams handle characters. So if this movie is just a set Strange, and of course, like the creative team on Ant-Man's been working hand in hand with him to like go in. So like if that's where he's going, and this series is going to become like a TVA offshoot, why not bring Clark Gregg? I don't know if everyone like knows that he has written and directed films as well.
Mm-hmm.
The adaptation of Choke he did, and he's the one who cast Sam Rockwell in it. And like he loves Sam Rockwell, which means we could get Sam Rockwell back in the MCU.
Oh, he's got to be in Armor Wars.
Oh, yeah, but like, could you imagine like if there's just Hammer variants running around with our Tom Hiddleston Loki variants? My world would explode. Like,
think of the sass.
Well, I've been hearing a theory of Loki being used as a buffer to undo like all the missteps that we have along the way. Like, where it's like, oh, that's a big plot hole. And then all of a sudden there's a season of Loki. Like, we're going to explain away the plot holes, which is actually really smart in a lot of ways if you think about just how many hands are at play. And that would actually be really fun. So I'm down for that. I don't know how much stock I put into it, but the people who are saying it are people who are pretty often correct. Where we'll get season 2 after our dive into madness, because then they can kind of retcon everything.
Yeah.
And be like, here's where we're at.
Well, that's what I've been wondering, because that has been the rumor around since this was acknowledged that this was going to happen. Like that people are like, oh, I can't wait for him to figure out why we've got 2 Rhodesies. And like, that's been like, since it was announced on pure speculation that this is what it was going to be. And I think that's the trouble with a time travel show in general, is like the expectations can go literally bonkers. We're not seeing that great world building that Tim has expressed that he was looking forward to. Instead, we got a character driven series about what makes a Loki. And I know you shared an article with us that like that's what they set up in the first episode, was this time hopping adventure. But what I saw them setting up was this character driven we're going to see Loki confront himself. I thought we were going to get Loki confronting himself in different scenes and scenery in different worlds, but I thought we were going to get exactly what we're getting is Loki figuring out who he is and what makes him him. We're getting it on a less grand scale that's more budget friendly, but it's just time travel is tough when you don't set those expectations, I think, before you even begin shooting, because there are so many wonderful ideas that have been thrown out since they first mentioned this was going to be a project in the future. And
Yeah.
you can't live up to everyone's expectations of everything. And I kind of like that they're like, well, no, we're telling a series about Loki trying to figure out what he is. So fuck you guys if you don't like it.
No, I just haven't even gotten that impression of the Loki figuring out who he is anymore. At first I did, and then I didn't. It's just been all over the place for me. That's why I'm hoping that they actually, I know they have to leave some things open at the end, but I really hope they tie up some things here. It's, I don't know. It's an interesting one for me because it completely boggles my mind. So far this series for episodes I liked versus episodes I didn't like is 2 to 3. So let's see if I end 50-50 on it.
Well, for the way you love everything, 50-50 would be a vast improvement over a lot of things.
That's very true.
I love that my brother went out of his way to tag you in a meme about the NBA and that being how you feel about Marvel movies.
I know. And then I criticized all the NBA fans.
It was a cheap shot from my brother, but I loved it. So,
and I criticized all the NBA fans.
Yeah, it will be interesting because I know they've talked about rebooting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, forget rebooting Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like, bring it in and call it canon, don't call it canon. But I think I would prefer a Clark Gregg as Coulson in the TVA. I think it'd be even funnier if it was like Loki that wanted Coulson in there, because like Coulson made such an impression on him, even though he killed him. And so they have to figure out, they spend half a season figuring out like why Loki torturing Coulson. Coulson's paranoid about it, like, but still doing the job. The dynamics there could be so fun.
Oh yeah, if we're bringing back characters, give me Coulson, damn it.
Yeah.
My God, we haven't seen him since Captain Marvel. It's been too long.
But it hasn't been too long since I've seen Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Well, no. According to We Got Covered, Brie Larson's out.
Oh yeah, every single week they have a new Captain Marvel.
I've seen 47 variations of that headline this month. So,
well, didn't you know she's just gonna be played by Tom Hiddleston? Loki is now Captain Marvel.
There are worse ideas, though.
Oh God!
I think that'll be a fun Game One podcast. Is I'm gonna read you a bunch of We've Got It Covered headlines, but also make up my own headlines, and you have to guess if it's actually something we got it covered or if it's not. Kind of like how people with the Onion, like, is this an Onion headline or is this a real headline? Only, is this we got it covered or did I make it up?
Well, do you know what really stinks? It's like my students try to connect with me, in my nerd realm. And it's like, oh my God, you see this? And I get excited. And I'm like, so I have to go on my spiel of like why this is not accurate, where they got it from, which leads into me talking about sourcing for research papers and things like that. Doing your homework. But oh God, that site. I need to start a counter site, I think.
Called You Don't Got It Covered?
I actually have you covered.
I mean, that tablecloth blanket Loki conjured up, that's got you covered.
I actually really liked that moment. That was cool.
Yeah, it was cute. I think the half blanket and drawing that out was a little bit unnecessary. Just conjure a full fucking blanket around both of you, but
I think the part of that's the trust too. Like, do you trust me to envelop you in this thing? Like, it's actually a nice dive into consent when you think about it. Because they talk about trusting each other. And
well, I think it was more so showing that he's still selfish because he only covered himself at first.
So we went completely opposite ends on that one.
Yeah, it honestly might be a combination of the two. I mean, here he's got to fight his nature as a selfish creature, so he's going to conjure it at first, but he's going to consider like throwing it around her, but he doesn't. He offers to conjure her something, and she makes the joke about a new outfit, which I thought for a second we were going to get her in like an enchantress green gown or something for that moment, and that's where I thought they were going. especially since you had the conversation about Gator Loki being a Loki because he was green. So I was like, oh, of course, this is where she gets her green outfit. That makes sense. I guess it didn't make enough sense. All right, so predictions that are going to most definitely be wrong. Who is beyond the end of time?
I'm gonna say King Loki.
I'm going to say the one who remains.
Yeah, and I think you guys both have the two picks I was going the most towards. So I'm gonna say it's a Renslayer variant that's in the classic comic book outfit.
Well,
Oh,
Could
I
you-
would flip. I fucking love that costume. I would flip.
could you make the argument that it could be Beyonder?
Could be. I've been calling for the Beyonder for all of these shows because I thought that's the direction we were going in, but I don't know when we're gonna finally see the Beyonder.
Yeah, it's interesting because it could be anyone. It could be still. We could get King Loki or Renslayer or the Beyonder or absolutely no one.
We could just get Kid Loki come back, be like, "Gotcha, fuck you guys, I'm doing what I want."
Yeah. A good point I did hear was that guards aren't always meant to keep people out. Sometimes they're meant to keep people in.
Mhm.
So
Ooh, that's ominous.
So could Renslayer be left in the dark by who's actually running the TVA because the person beyond time is the person who's going to end up destroying the TVA? Like, does that take us in a whole different direction? Is that how they set up Quantum Mania and Multitude of Madness? Is they just freed whoever? I don't think we have enough time left in the series for that. It would leave on a cliffhanger of all cliffhangers, but
I'm more curious if we're getting an end credit scene, to be honest.
I'm more hopeful we don't.
I have the feeling we won't. Like, for the first time, I kind of have a feeling like, yeah, they're just not gonna do one.
It does feel like whether we get a partial resolution or a full resolution, it feels like this series is ending in a cliffhanger.
Yeah, for sure.
The purpose of this series
Oh,
was
yeah.
to set up these two movies. And so we are definitely getting a cliffhanger. I'm just thankful I felt we were getting a cliffhanger from the beginning. So there's no disappointment in that for me, but that's going to piss a lot of people off, I think.
Well, here's the thing. We need a reason for the Eternals to exist. So it definitely has to set up something around there too, because they're not just a team that comes in lightly. So I feel like we have to get time fucked in some severe manner because there has to be a reason for them to come. Just like there has to be a reason for the TVA to get involved. But for the Eternals, there actually does. So like what event is about to occur that's going to make that necessary?
Yeah. Which if the reason they sent Renslayer to get Sylvie when she was so young was because she's the one that they thought could free the actual big bad. I mean, which still makes them big bads, really. Like there's no good guy in the situation. So it's interesting. I think ultimately any disappointments that you're going to get from the series are going to lead for the fact that this series was meant to just set up 3+ movies, because this probably is supposed to be setting up Spider-Man to a degree too. So you get 4 movies coming that this was setting up, and that's the purpose of this series. That it's hard to be a great standalone series when you're just interconnecting.
Mm-hmm. I just almost wish the series didn't try so hard and just played the role of the connector in some ways. Though, they get you so invested in this group and in what's to come. And I went into it knowing we wouldn't have a clean ending, but there's so many issues where there needs to be an ending. So I hope that they dissect that enough to move it to the second season as well as all these other projects, which in the grand scheme of things, yes, these other projects are in the MCU, but in a lot of ways, they're also completely unrelated. So there's just, I think, Tim, I think I told you at one point, none of these series seem to make sense together. It's like they had these projects they want to do and they're just doing them. But
yeah,
I'm just very interested to see how they connect all this. And there is no big bad that really makes sense. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, Kang isn't that huge of a bad, but I guess that's the direction they're going to. So I'm just beyond curious of what's in store for this phase. If it was just standalone movies and buddy team ups every now and then, as opposed to the Avenger style stuff. I'd get it more, but knowing that we have big bads being set up, I don't know. I'm just really curious how it all connects, or if it'll all connect successfully.
Doesn't matter how it connects. I will forever hope and pray for this to happen. I want Kang to appear. I want him to do his thing in Quantumania. I want him to disappear somewhere in the timeline and then show up in the next phase. I feel like I say this theory every episode to every other episode, but goddamn, do I really want it? Because he's a time traveler. He needs to be, and to actually bring in elements for, real life time would just be fantastic.
Yeah,
and Jonathan Majors he's my age. So they can definitely use him further down the line if need be.
Yeah.
Well, that's been the interesting part about a lot of the casting, because in the earlier phases, they were not necessarily going for the most well-known of names, but they're going for people who went around. I mean, obviously, Robert Downey Jr. was a household name, not for all the right reasons, but he was a household name, which is why he was the one accepted over Favreau's first choice, Sam Rockwell. And I loved Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer performance, but I think he would have been a better Robert Downey Jr., but it would have been a different Robert Downey Jr. So it's but if you know Sam Rockwell Jr., you love Sam Rockwell Jr., but he wasn't the household name he's still not the household name Robert Downey Jr. was when Robert Downey Jr. was cast for this. So now they're going younger. I mean, Florence Pugh's on the up and up, but she's in her early 20s. So she could be playing the next Widow for the next 15, 20 years. I mean, they're casting young Avengers who could do the same thing. So they're going younger. I mean, even Chris Evans, who didn't really break out, but he'd been Johnny Storm. Granted, like his other big successful movie was
not another teen movie.
Yeah, not another teen movie where he's playing the heartthrob. So it's interesting that they are going younger and even unknowns in a lot of cases. So they are planning to have these folks around for the future, which kind of makes sense because they signed Robert Downey Jr. to like all those pictures, but then they threw him in every project to tie the universe together. But it was really because, oh shit, Robbie Downey Jr. is going to be 65 by the time we naturally get him to appear in all these films. So they just kind of crammed him in them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the Jonathan Majors age thing is like so crucial because, he could just appear and then you could wait 2 phases to have him come back.
Yeah.
Maybe he pops up just quickly in a season 2 of Loki, or if season 2 is just renamed and it's the TVA or something, he could show up every once in a while and you could spread it out for 5 years before that phase is where he's the villain.
Yeah, I can get down with that.
Or you don't need an overarching big bad for each phase.
That too.
I mean, he could show up, he could be the villain for a couple things and dip out and show back up. But I think that's the biggest disconnect between what a movie is and what a comic book is, though. Like a movie franchise is like there's an overarching thing. Whereas a comic book series, the X-Men could be fighting the Brotherhood for a couple issues, then the Brotherhood like scamper off and someone else comes in. Like, oh wait, the Brood have invaded. So you can jump around more in a comic book because if you're reading a comic book and you're waiting a month to get that next issue, the attention to detail you're paying is bigger than the average popcorn movie fan. There's a reason so many of these action films are brainless.
Oh, yeah.
Which there's nothing wrong with some mindless entertainment. But
most of it is.
Yeah. All right. Anything else about this episode you guys want to touch upon before we wrap up?
No, there were just a lot of fun moments together, or a bunch of fun moments to experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Great. Yeah, great moments, great visuals. If you were to take any episode so far that you were like, this is a great standalone episode, I think this one sits best by itself.
Yeah, I agree. Just beautiful, and just that the acting was great. I really hope Kid Loki sticks around in future projects too.
Yeah, and it's tough because I know they are skewing younger, but he is so young. We don't know how he's going to age as an actor, but for what they asked him to do here, he nailed it. So
yeah,
obviously,
I'd take him in Young Avengers any day.
Yeah, obviously, classic Loki was the star of this episode. This episode was designed for him to be the star of the episode, but Kid Loki held his own. So
yeah, without doubt.
All right, let's do our no Mary Date chill. I've been battling a cold and a bad migraine all week, so I didn't want to think of one. So I also don't have a reading rack. I know you guys discussed before we got on that, Dan, you are reading with your daughter. So if you've got kids, what are you telling the folks to read with their kids?
Dogman and Catboy this week. We will see what Dogman feature we are on in the next week. But it's a comic book style book that does not have the made up words in it like most comic books does. So it's all real words, real vocabulary, and driving story done in comic book form. So it's solid for the kids. Many eye rolls at the booger jokes on my end, but she loves them. She giggles, and I enjoy that time as a parent with her. So definitely check out the Dogman series. I just ordered the set for her for her birthday.
Did you guys also read Captain Underpants, or did you just?
Yeah, love Captain Underpants.
Okay, I was about to say I have only read a couple like pages, but one of the ladies that I worked with in my time in Borders, who was a couple years older than me, she would sit in the back of the store reading Captain Underpants and just laughing her ass off. So
it's a good time, actually. It is. If you don't take yourself too seriously, you can enjoy Captain Underpants.
All right, and Tim, your rec last week was perfect in a perfect sentiment.
Thank you.
And ties in with, of course, one of the ladies from my book club wanted to join us, but she logged on to Disney Plus and only watched Black Widow and none of the series stuff because she went from having absolutely nothing to do to people showing up to visit her over in Seattle. But she was talking to me briefly before we started recording about Black Widow, and that's made her want to read more of the character.
That's awesome.
And of course, I instantly offered her my Disney Plus login, and she said, "No, I want to own them, ho," because that's the respect level she has for me. But then she asked how much Marvel Unlimited was because she was thinking about getting it herself. So
nice.
we've said it here before, like whether it's issues, whether it's graphic novels, whether you're reading the comic book e-files, like read. Which, speaking of read, let's do our Mephisto Reed Richards locks of the week. Dan.
Yellow Jacket will end up being the villain of the show.
I love it. Well, it's a supersized Yellow Jacket too, so he's learned to grow. Tim.
Learning to fly, but he ain't got wings.
Throg will get Mjolnir. One way or another, he's gonna get that hammer.
Oh, that'd be a great moment.
That would be brilliant. You guys just picked actual like real things that could be fun if they did happen. I'm gonna say that they get lost on the way to this castle they're seeing in the distance, and they never get there. And that's because right when they're about to open the door, Thor wakes up and it was all a dream inside Thor's head. I'm going the JR and Dallas route with it.
So you're actually really going with Lost too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. This has been a pleasure, as I say every week, because it always is a pleasure. More fun when you guys kind of flip the roles, and Dan was slightly optimistic and Tim was pessimistic. I love it. I love it. The double turn, as they call it in wrestling. Dan went face and Tim went heel, and it was perfect.
But how the choosing my heel.
Oh, how the turntables.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
No problem.